Guns, slaves and drugs provided the financial foundations of many of England's great families and fortunes. Large areas of Georgian and Victorian London were built with the proceeds of the opium trade. Brixton, for example, Denmark Hill. Many great institutions, banks, insurance and brokerage firms rose on its profits. No outward signs distinguish these companies or districts. They're not despised. Yet their past is part of a particularly ugly chapter in the history of our country and its trade. Our subject is the traders and their trade in the early days of the free market, the drug trade.
In international law, a nation cannot claim authority unless it is capable of enforcing it. Moral power along the coast means a 24-pounder and British seamen behind it. A scheme of distribution is necessary, and this is trade, in every respect free and unconstrained. Monopoly control is legitimate where revenue, not profit, is concerned. If people want to drink near beer, then sell it to them.
The celebrated English habit of drinking tea, supplied by the Chinese, increased alarmingly in the mid-18th century. Alarmingly because China exported luxury goods, tea, silk and porcelain, to England, but declined to import from England goods apart, of course, from the gold and silver bullion from its treasuries. In a single year, 1789, England's merchants had to dispatch £4 million in silver to pay for the tea. The dilemma is curiously familiar, a colossal deficit in England's balance of payments requiring urgent action. The solution was aggressive free trade in drugs. Opium, grown as a cash crop in an Indian colony, could be sold to the Chinese tea sellers at vast profit. China's export success with tea consequently provoked destructive retaliation, the sustained illegal marketing over a century and a half of opium and opium addiction to its people. International trade in drugs was already established. Exports of the stimulants, tobacco and coffee were the standby of many of the early colonial settlements in North and in South America. What was unique to Britain's opium trade was its merchants' open avowal of the drug's harm. So it had to be a commodity for foreign trade. And since opium was banned by the Chinese, the British became the world's first outlaw drug barons. They were to fight wars to stay in that business. It was free trade that saved the British from pangs of conscience. But the traders had first to be protected by the state. The English country ships, doubling as traders and men of war, had already opened up world markets. One of the most important was in northeast India, where, by royal charter, the East India Company held the monopoly. The Battle of Plassey, won in 1757 by Clive, resulted in the East India Company becoming the government of the region. The first governor of Bengal, Clive, commanded
the Ganges Plain, with 100 channels to the sea, its soil capable of 3 rice crops a year, a rich tropical sky rivaling the verdure of an English April. Spices, sugar, and vegetable oils are produced with marvelous exuberance. In spite of the Maratha freebooter, Bengal was known throughout the East as the Garden of Eden.
During the decade after Plassey, the garden was pillaged until it was converted into a near desert. Clive was one of the beneficiaries. On his return to England, his wealth brought him control of 10 MPs to represent his interests. He soon died, however, of an overdose of laudanum.
A great event happened 2 days ago, a political and moral event. The sudden death of Kuli Khan, Lord Clive. Oh, there was certainly illness in the case. The world thinks more than illness, On Tuesday, his physician gave him a dose of laudanum, which had not the desired effect. Of the rest, there are two stories. One, that the physician repeated the dose. The other, that he doubled it himself, contrary to advice.
For a time, agricultural mismanagement, compounded by corruption, plagued the East India Company's earliest plans. Its officials stole without stint, from Governor-General to warehouse clerk.
The management of affairs is left to harpies. No sooner let loose upon the country than they plunder the inhabitants with or without pretenses, and at the sacrifice of every principle of honor, render to their employers but a small portion of their ill-gotten gain.
The company's near bankruptcy necessitated government injections of cash, amounting in 1 year alone, 1785, to almost an eighth of the Crown's annual income.
£2 million of our taxes have already been granted to this East India Company, wherewith to pay the dividend on their stock. And perhaps a further £1 million will be called from us during the present Parliament.
It was William Bolts, one of the company's servants, who showed how the disastrous financial situation could be remedied. He secured preferential trading agreements, avoiding taxes levied from his native competitors in the food market, and by cutting his prices, he bankrupted them, then raised prices to customers while forcing the suppliers, the peasant farmers, to accept less.
Objectors were confined or flogged.
Bolts became £90,000 richer within 6 years. Those who followed his precedent could, on return to England, afford a country seat, or better yet, one in Parliament. Bengal's peasant farmers, impoverished by such speculation, were soon forced from food production into poppy production. Cash inducements for seed purchase from the company, followed by the threat of foreclosure for debt, effectively compelled the peasant to switch to a cash crop.
They wrung from him the very opium in which he forgot his oppressor.
Disease and sickness are spreading in Bangladesh.
Opium plantations quickly and disastrously altered the land itself. Clearance of hardier crops and woodlands struck at the soil's water retention and contributed to the pattern of severe seasonal flooding which persists to this day.
Meanwhile, families go on collecting contaminated water.